Hey Snapchat, last couple of days of vacation, got a couple of minutes before I have to get in the shower. Thought I'd talk about how to run more effective board meetings at a start. Effective board meeting starts with great preparation. What you need to do is get your financials done early because that's the thing the board's going to want to discuss initially. You really need to submit it 72 hours before a board meeting. This is critical if you want to have an effective board meeting. I'm going to explain why. Most board members are busy, and most boards send the decks the night before, maybe 24 hours in advance. So the board members are scrambling to read it before the board meeting. If a board member doesn't read it in advance, they're not going to turn up to the meeting ready to help you at the same level because frankly, they're not understanding the business. By submitting your board pack 72 hours in advance, you change the entire nature of the board meeting and the entire nature of the discussion in ways I'm going to explain. First, what you want to do is make sure you do a call with each board member before the board meeting to walk through the financials with them. This way you make sure every board meeting's actually prepared for the board meeting, and it also has another benefit. You get to tease out whether that board member has any issues going into the board meeting or anything that they themselves want to discuss. And this is important because the golden rule of a board meeting is no surprises. You don't want to be surprised. If you have the calls in advance, you're not going to be surprised. I'm here to tell you that 75% of all board meetings that I've ever been to are people just walking through perfunctory financial numbers. That's zero value. The goal of a board meeting for you should be to discuss strategic topics, to get input from board members on things that's racking your brain. So the agenda for a board meeting should not be to walk through financials. What I recommend you do is pick 2 to 3 strategic topics. The strategic topics in advance and give people options that you want to discuss, and you can get input from your most trusted sources. And the advantage of most boards is that you have members who sit on many different boards, so they offer outside counsel and advice. Boards are also going to feel way more in tune with you if they're getting asked for advice. People are there and want to give advice. The length of a board meeting is highly dependent on how early or late stage. The earlier, the shorter, the later, the longer. If you have 3 or 4 non-management board members and you've raised a bit of capital, you probably should be planning for a 3-hour board meeting. At the earliest stages, I would say 2 hours. Anything shorter than that, you're just simply not going to discuss any strategic topic. I think it's great to invite management to come in, invite your head of sales or marketing or product or engineering to come talk about their areas. But generally, the only people who should be there for the majority of the meeting are the board members, the management board members, and the CFO. Let your members of your team speak during their functions. What you really want to do is have the board have relationships and have firsthand knowledge of what they think. It's also a great sign of respect for your senior management to give them a chance to be on stage in front of venture capitalists and other board members. When you do all the speaking, in a way, I know it feels better because you feel more in control, but in a way, it actually is worse with investors and worse with management. Don't let individual members of a board take you down a rat hole. If someone's pushing you to go really deep in an inappropriate area, put a pin in it. Here's how. You can simply say, I've heard you on the topic. I've made a note. We promise to follow up with you after the board meeting. I'd like a chance to make sure we get through all the topics. I also highly recommend adding dinners to the end of some of your board meetings. Having a board that knows each other socially will help you get hard decisions made. Many people do this the night before a board meeting. This is a mistake for reasons I'm going to tell you in a second. When you have the board dinner the night before, the whole board meeting gets discussed the night before, so the board becomes a perfunctory repeat of dinner. I recommend doing board meetings from 3 to 6, followed by a dinner. I know some investors want it earlier. I wouldn't do that. What you need to know about board minutes is most board minutes leave out the details for legal reasons, so the board minutes don't do a good job of actually summarizing the discussion. Get your board minutes done immediately, send them out to board members immediately and get them signed off under a UWC, unanimous written consent. 90% of boards leave the minutes until the next meeting. No one remembers what was discussed, no one reads them in advance, and you end up rushing through the approval. But more important than actually the board minutes is what was actually agreed at the meeting. So much gets agreed and isn't codified. I recommend a separate set of actions which are not a legally binding document, but where you send out to investors and say, these are the 8 things that I believe we agree. Make sure these things have action items against them. Make sure that if board members signed up to any of the actions themselves, that it's on paper and they're held accountable. Send out the list of things that were actually agreed in a group email and get everyone to weigh in and say, yes, these are the 8 things we agreed. By getting it locked in, you avoid a very common problem on boards is people misremembering what was actually discussed or agreed. As your board gets larger and more complex, you'll break out some of the key functions like a compensation committee and an audit committee to smaller groups. Boards are notoriously hard to manage, and most people do it poorly. This is a starting point to help you have better, more effective meetings. I'm going to spend the next several days giving you a lot more advice on how to be an effective board and how to help you better manage your board. I hope you get some value.